long have you been out in Denver now?
I only moved I guess it's a weird story because I moved out of my place in LA the start of October. I was homeless until mid-November when we can move in. So I was just like, wherever I was touring over that month and a half, I would just stay for like 5 days or whatever.
Oh, nice. You were just an extended tourist.
I was nomading like crazy. And then we finally got to move in on the 15th. And it was just me. And then I went on the bus tour with Sullivan King on the 17th. So I got about 36 hours in.
Oh man.
And then I came back, on the 22nd of December. And then I went back to do New Year's Eve shows on the 30th, and now I'm back I came back on the 2nd. So I've been here for like months, but I haven't been here at all.
yeah, like you barely feel like you moved in, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, how was there's so many things we could talk about, but how was the touring with COVID and all that right now? Because you were in the midst of it, man. I just haven't talked to anyone who's been on the road like during an actual like surge, right. You know?
Like recently, we did the bus tour, and it was it was terrifying because there was a bunch of other artists that had tours that had to be canceled early on or halfway through or whatever because of the COVID thing. And we were just like tiptoeing, fucking stepping on eggshells, just like kind of waiting for someone to get sick or something. And then, we did like get sick in the end because we had a show in New York, and New York was fucking surging by that stage.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of inevitable. And then we sort of all figured out like half of us had it during that week. And then we had to cancel the last like 4 shows. So best case scenario, really, because we ended up doing pretty much all of that leg except for the last couple of shows.
Yeah, true, man. I mean, it's one of those things where, it's kind of this like impossible situation for anyone doing what we do right now because, you can be as safe as humanly possible, but like the conditions of touring are such that, there's no way. Like just what you physically have to do to get on stage in a room full of people, it's like, there's no way to make that 100% safe, No,
exactly. And I mean, like, it's a cesspool of COVID goodness when like down there for them, you know what I mean? It's just like, what do we do here? But like at the same time, it's like, we can't just not do anything forever. And then for us, like, cause the big part about shows for me, especially are doing the sort of meet and greets afterwards and going down to the crowd and like hanging out. And the fact that we can't do that is a really big downer, like for, fan growth and like the connectivity, especially for like me and like my brand. I put emphasis on that, and it's like, okay, bye, and then we leave, and it sucks.
Right. Well, it's interesting to talk about it in terms of like the part of your brand as well. I mean, is that also part of your personality? Are you a person who likes to have a lot of people around, meet a lot of new people?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I don't do anything like outside of my like part of my brand that I wouldn't do myself. So technically, it would just be, this is just like who I am. And I really enjoy meeting the people who support me, as corny as that sounds, you know what I mean? Like that's just, it's super fun.
I don't think that's corny at all, man. I think that's kind of that's the ideal way to be, because I'm sure you and I both know people who are the opposite way, who don't feel very comfortable meeting the people who support them. And that's a tough position to be in,
Totally. Yeah, 100%. I mean, like, it's good to just reciprocate, because I mean, like, we do the studio thing, and then for so long, and the shows are, the kind of, in a way, like a bit of a payoff, because we get to, express and show the music that we've been working on. And then to be able to have that added, like, sort of layer of bonus of being able to, like, meet the people who actually give a shit about it is, like, such a big deal, I think.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I know back when you were in Australia, you were DJing plenty as a local back in the day. Were you a DJ first or a producer first?
I was a DJ first. Yeah. I ended up studying DJing when I was about 17, sort of like just before I turned 18.
I feel like a lot of Australians are going that route. Like in the States, I was a DJ first, but I'm a little older. And I feel like in the States, it flipped to production first, like a lot faster.
It did, right? Because I thought the same thing. I was like, most people that I talk to nowadays are producers first and then DJs later. Whereas that just seems like it makes sense, because you can just go and start producing nowadays, like on your laptop pretty easily. So yeah, but I mean, like when it comes to performing, I guess it definitely helped the fact that I was, learn how to read a crowd and do all that kind of thing beforehand. So now the actual DJing side of it comes really naturally.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. And for me too, I mean, it's still and always will be the most fun part of it. Like you said, it's the payoff part of it. It's like what I do the other stuff in order to be able to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I was
100%.
just talking to, I don't know if you know Anna Luno very well, but I was just talking to her for this podcast and she was saying something similar that, yeah, there's something about that. And maybe it's just because it's like what we started off doing, but I do also still feel like it's maybe my strongest skill set, like in the subset of what we do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Especially when we start out doing it, it kind of like becomes part of us and part of like how we, express it.
I mean, even in production too, I feel like having a DJ brain while making music can help because you can kind of visualize what it's going to look like when you're going to play it, right?
But that's the thing, I find that like, it wasn't just you're right. It wasn't just the playing in front of people. It was like figuring out for me, like knowing better how things would work in terms of like the set flow and like what songs would come after what and what would work best. And like, how the dynamic of the set would actually work. I think that was like a big part of like what you'd learn early on just by doing it and sort of seeing what would happen. So then when you do go to put a set together, you kind of like have that in your back of your head and someone else wouldn't because they haven't necessarily done it before. So it was like, I think that experience, just that Showtime experience is, pretty crucial in a way.
And I think you can even see it in modern production, like I guess 2021, 2022 production is... You can kind of tell, even the most technical, weirdest, most experimental producers, you can kind of tell if they have a DJ background or not, because there's some of the, some tunes that I think people make intending to play out to big crowds that are technically like incredible, but just don't work on dance floors that well. And then there's another side of it where there's the hyper technical people who still know, what they need to do structurally, arrangement wise, all that to really make their weird 100%. Ideas pop off.
There's so many variables in that sense. Like, yeah. It's like what's going to work well live or what's going to stream well or what's going to like, I mean, then it comes to like mixing and mastering and how things, how big the kick is and like all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's why, as, lame as it is, like that's why big room house works, because it's fucking simple and it's like straight to the point and it's like not overcomplicated. So like live, it just slaps because it's just like one big long kick and that just goes over and you can, you know what I mean? Whereas like, something more technical that's like overcomplicated doesn't translate the same way on like a huge system. So it's like
100%, man. And big room house, I mean, like even the term big room house, I think is like, people have a reaction to just hearing that term at this point. But there's something about, I mean, in a way, it's like, it's so pure and so simple. Like I still find a lot of that stuff actually really great. And especially, I think, if we're putting on our producer hat, it's like we're always trying to push the envelope and try to like make something new and fresh and experimental and, something people haven't heard before. But then sometimes you go to a show and all of your great ideas like don't stand up to just like a long kick drum, which is for me at least, is a really good like ego check and a reminder that like, making it more complex is not necessarily making it better.
It's not always the move. It's really not. Yeah, 100%. It's just like you can play the most, I'll play a 4 to the floor kick tune flip that I've made and it like will get the biggest reaction compared to something that like I took months to make type shit. Like it's one of those funny things, hey.
Yeah, it is, man. I mean, talking about, what's going to work in the club, what's going to work well on streaming, what's going to be forward thinking, all of that. Are these thoughts you actually have while you're making music? What is your current like songwriting process look like?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I should do that more, but I try not to get caught up in that too much because I don't. Yeah, it's such a kind of like two-way crazy street that I've not figured out whether or not I want to go to, like, because I don't want to pander to just making like dance floor stuff at the same time, but you need to like have that in the back of your head for sure.
Right.
But I feel like when I am actually caught up in the writing process, that isn't, at the forefront of my mind, which I think is good. I think it's good to, for me to focus on just writing and feeling and doing all that kind of stuff and, writing from intuition and all that sort of shit, as opposed to like being like, what's going to work on the dance floor? If it's a big like dubstep sort of tune where that's the point of it,
right?
Then yeah. But I suppose, yeah, it really depends. But at the same time, like the big melodic, crazy, like synthy stuff I think less about it there. But at the same time, you do like have that in the back of your mind, and it comes down to like mixing and making it sound as big as possible and all that kind of thing. So I guess it does sit there for sure, but it's not like, it's not the first thing in my head.
Well, I think that's the key, right? It's not the first thing. It's not where you start off from. Because I'm sure you know people too. Like I've known people as well who, they'll sit down and before they played a single note, it's like, okay, I'm going to make the craziest banger today, or like the wildest. Yeah,
there's a time and place for that. And that's okay. Like that's super okay, because we need those, and that's what if it works on the floor, then fucking amazing. Like, so there's definitely nothing wrong with that. But it depends. It just depends what the intention is.
Yeah. Well, and I admire people. You can tell me how you are with this afterwards, but I admire people who can just sit down with an intention and make exactly what they thought they were going to make,
That blows my mind. I feel like every time I talk to an artist, I think I've maybe met one or two people that actually do that. I remember that when I first started, that was kind of like, I was, we were driving in a car and I had an idea, and then I'd be like, this is how the music process works. Like the creation process works. You have this idea and you go and like try and write it and you make it into something. That never worked.
Right.
That never worked for me. Right. I would always have like voice notes on my phone of me, like making a melody or whatever out of my, like with my mouth. And then I'd go to the studio and just like wouldn't translate the same. That could be because I wasn't well trained enough as a producer initially for that to actually work. So now maybe that would make sense. But ever since then, I was just like, I need to let go of that and just like see what happens and what comes out. And a lot of us, I was talking to like my producer friends here, but like a lot of us are very intuitive writers. It's like none of us know what the hell we're doing realistically.
Yeah.
We're just sitting down and kind of like getting down what we feel. And I suppose that's where a lot of the rawness comes from with our music, is just like tapping into that as opposed to going, this is exactly what I want this to sound like. Because I mean, like a lot of us aren't, it's such a funny prospect, because a lot of us aren't as technical as what people think we are.
Of course.
Like unless you're like a Virtual Riot or something, who's like a virtuoso in production sort of thing. And I don't know, but I'm assuming like he has a pretty damn good idea of like how to get down what he wants to get down.
Right.
But there would definitely be like a level of intuitive writing in the sense that, he would feel what's going on, but he'd have a better idea of like how to actually get the sound design portion of that like pristine. Whereas for me, I'm more of a, like, I'll do the whole like bass jam thing and make sounds for like 5 minutes in like one and record it, and then pick little bits and pieces out of that bass jam that I think sounds cool. And then, use that in my song as like a resampling type vibe, as opposed to going, I know this is exactly what sound I want for this specific portion. I'm going to make it with this LFO and do that. I can do that to a degree, but like, I would rather not.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's that makes sense to me, man, working in that way. Someone was telling me once that Skrillex was kind of similar that way, that he would kind of do what you were talking about, just make a bunch of crazy noises for a long time, chop them all up, and then almost assemble like a personal sample library for himself of just shit that he made, that then for the next few months, he would just hop into that library anytime he didn't know what to do and just pull something out of there.
Absolutely. I think that like I actually learned that from Company, funnily enough, as well. Like just doing those sorts of things, and even like AU5, watching his sort of stuff. It's like just doing these jams and having this like library of music that you can go and revert to when you are in that creative mode. Because I feel like for me, especially, if I'm like trying to write a drop or a track or whatever, and I'm in a flow and I'm like, okay, I need to make a sound to fit into this spot, I need to completely shift gears and go into another headspace. And then to do that is really quite difficult to then go back into the flow that I had before.
Yeah.
So I feel like having that library is like just a really quick, intuitive way to kind of like fill in and make what you're feeling and what you think is going to work at the time, and layering and doing all that kind of stuff. You have all that stuff there ready for you to use. And if you like find that the sound's not working, then later you can go in and be like, okay, I'm going to make this, make a sound that actually sounds like this in a little bit better or cleaner of a way.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good point, man. Talking about like switching flows in the middle and all that. I hope people understand what we're talking about there. Because if you do hit that spark, if all of a sudden you do have some kind of inspiration and you're on the hunt for something, you're on the scent of something, it's so easy to lose that. I think you always want to set yourself up for when those moments hit, you're able to sort of just flawlessly or efficiently execute those ideas. And you're totally right. Something as small as I need a sound for this and I don't immediately have that sound in front of me, that can totally throw you off an idea. It's so funny how that happens.
That's it though. Yeah, exactly. Efficiency, I think is a really good word for that. I think because I'm a big advocate for templates and like workflow and all that kind of stuff. And I teach that on my Patreon and like make sure that, I'll do full videos on like how to make a template and like how to arrange your sample library and shit. Just because if I need to go and find a kick, like I don't need to fuck around and like scroll through 10 or 12 different like subfolders to find this one thing. I have all my kicks there ready to go and I can just pick and choose what I want and it's super easy.
Yeah.
Same with like if I need to find something in my projects are pretty organized for the most part, but yeah, definitely a lot more organized than some I've seen. But it's like in every project, if I need to go and find where like the main synth is, it's in the same fucking spot. Or if like you want to find where the vocal is, it's in the same spot every time. Like, and I think that definitely helps like any roadblocks, I suppose, in that creative process.
How long have you been doing the teaching and the Patreon and all that? Was that a COVID thing, or have you been doing that for a while?
Yeah, I think the COVID thing definitely kickstarted it for sure. It's something that I've always enjoyed doing, like the whole teaching thing and giving back and all that kind of stuff. Whatever I've been doing in life, I always enjoyed sort of like sharing whatever I knew, whatever I thought I knew anyway. And I think COVID gave me an opportunity to start the Patreon and start doing like one-on-one lessons and all that kind of thing. The Patreon's the only thing that's kept going because that's a really cool little community I've got going there, and like doing the videos and sample packs and all that kind of stuff for them is rewarding. So and I have the time to do it, whereas the one-on-one lessons I don't tend to have the time right now, especially on touring.
It's intense.
Yeah. It is. But yeah, so I definitely started that sort of during the pandemic, during the downtime.
So what you said that, you've always enjoyed, sharing knowledge or mentoring or whatever that is. Are there other or earlier things in your life where you had that kind of role?
I mean, for the DJing thing, I think that was probably a big one because I had started that early on. And when I was back in my hometown in Canberra, like I would try and teach people that were coming up and the people at the club that I was like playing at most often, and giving them pointers and sort of being there and showing them different ways and the kind of and giving advice in that sense.
I think nice, man. Yeah, not a lot of people. Yeah. I don't know. Not a lot of people did that for me when I was a young DJ.
No, but that's the thing. That's why I think is the biggest reason for me, because especially with the Patreon and all that stuff, it's like I didn't have any of these resources back in the day. I didn't have anyone to do one-on-one mentoring with, like, and all that kind of shit. So I'm like, if I can offer that to people, like, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Well, what was Canberra like? Because I've been to Australia, but never there. Is there like a stereotype of somebody from Canberra?
No, I don't think so. I don't know because I'm like too deep in it, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I mean, like Canberra's a small, it's the capital city for one. So it's kind of like DC in a way. It's like very planned out and very like, I don't know, pretty.
Yeah.
And it's in this valley and it's about 350,000, 400,000 people. So it's kind of like a small town vibe where everyone knows everyone in a way, which is good and bad. But for like me, it was good in the sense that like, you can get, you're a big fish in a small pond type thing. So when I needed to get like a notice or whatever, it wasn't too hard. And I could then go to somewhere like Sydney next and already have that sort of, I guess, like fan base or whatever and platform to help me move into like that scene. Whereas if I just started in Sydney and it's millions of people, it's a lot harder to find the right people and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
that makes total sense. I'm in DC, by the way. I don't know if you knew that, but
I didn't know that. Okay, right. Hell yeah.
But, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Because it's the same as, political buildings everywhere. Everyone works for the government and all that kind of thing. So it's a very safe, very like family oriented kind of place in a way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't grow up in DC, so I didn't have quite that experience, but just living here now, it's a really unique kind of experience. My complaint with DC sometimes is that, because it's such a government town, it's so transient. There's always people, nobody stays there for that long. And so like the local culture can sometimes there is local culture and it's awesome, but it can sometimes be harder to find because so many people are cycling in and out all the time. Was it anything like that in Canberra?
I think I found it to be the opposite, only because everyone gets stuck there because it's so comfortable.
Right.
Me and my friend used to talk about this, and when we moved out of the town and went to like Sydney and stuff like that, we were like, it was good for us to do that because you can get stuck in that cycle, especially because, you're a big fish in a small pond. You can get comfortable with the luxuries that come with that, you know what I mean? And so I owe so much to that town and so much to that club that I grew up in and everything. So that helps me to move forward. I just some people just need to take this kind of initiative to do that in the first place, I think.
Well, were you a club kid? Like, what kind of a kid were you in terms of your musical education experiences early on?
I mean, I never thought of myself. I thinking back, I always go, I was never. This is such a funny thing for me to be in because I wasn't like a huge club kid. But then I suppose when I did turn 18, I wasn't like huge into EDM necessarily, but when I did turn 18, I was like, oh, this is this world. Okay. And I wasn't like the coolest kid going out or anything. Like I was, just as sweaty and drunk as every other 18-year-old. But then I was a bartender and I was a barista. And then I turned into a bartender so that I could get into the club that I wanted to play at. So I could throw the lighting guy like a shitty mix CD every week until he booked me. Like I'm pretty sure I went through at least 25 of those before they were like, okay, you can close after, I don't know, somebody on a Friday night.
At that point, just doing it so you'll stop giving them CDs.
Yeah. It's just like, by that stage. I mean, but so after that, it was great. And I had enough experience, but it was funny because I was just like at that point where each week I was like, oh, this one's so much better than the last one. Like, don't worry about the last one, just do this. And it was like, it just did that. It went on for months and months. It was so funny.
That's hilarious. That's like the IRL, the physical version of like punishing someone on an email,
Yeah. Legitimately harassed them with blank CDs.
It's so good, man. Well, what was like even earlier on, before you could get into clubs, before you were a bartender, all that, do you have early musical memories that stick with you? Were your folks musical? Yeah. Is there anything in the past that sort of, maybe was an indicator of what was going to come? Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't actually think I was going to be a musician necessarily. I've been playing guitar, recreationally since I was like 10 years old. Like Nirvana, Come As You Are was like the first thing my brother taught me on acoustic and all that kind of shit. And my mom was a guitarist as well. And my brother was a drummer for a local band and back in the day and like all that kind of thing. So it was always there. And I definitely loved music. Like I'd fall asleep listening to Master of Puppets, like Metallica album type thing, like every night. For some reason, I was just like, yeah, this is lulling me to sleep. Yeah. And then mom was like, why are you doing calming,
this?
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense. But I was out like a light every time.
I used to have, I had one of those like CD players that you could set like an alarm. So you could, it would just start playing at a certain time.
Yeah.
And I used to, my like high school time to go to school, like 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever music was, it was usually like Slayer or,
Rain and Blood straight away.
Yeah, Rain and Blood or Fear Factory or, whatever else was popping at that time. But yeah, I never went to bed with it, man. Maybe I should have tried that.
I don't know, dude. Maybe. I was like, hopefully I have these subliminal things that stick in my head and I'm going to remember like every note and every word of the song when I do this.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that. It's like falling asleep to positive affirmations or something.
That's it. Exactly. I feel like my mom was probably just like, she'd probably show me a video of have you ever seen these things when I think it's either ice or like water. And when you play, say like metal through it, it's all like fucking crazy and cracked and whatever. And then when you play like classical music, it's like really all aligned and nice and stuff.
Oh, interesting.
And she was probably like, right. Yeah. And she was probably like, this is what it's doing in your brain and your water molecules. Please stop listening to this. And I'm like, no, we're good.
That's amazing.
But yeah.
I guess I haven't seen those videos, but just thinking about it, I wonder if that has to do with the fact that, classical music is so mathematical in its composition.
I don't know, dude. I feel like something like Tool would probably be okay with that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Maybe if maybe like a super quantized Tool record or something.
Yeah. Some Fibonacci shit going on. Yeah. I mean, who knows? I'll have to check it out again. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the kind of the sentiment behind it all. And I was like, you know what? That's probably not a bad idea. Now I can't go to sleep with anything. I have to be like in pure silence.
Yeah. I have to use a white noise machine because we got all this construction happening around us. But I'm usually the same as you, man. That being said, this is a rant. I don't know why I just thought of this, but I have been able to fall asleep like in a green room during a show before, which I feel like is not something.
Depends how tired you are. It depends how tired you are. Yeah. But yeah, I could see myself doing that on the tour, like on the bus. It's kind of like that. You sort of have to find your spots to have a rest. But
was that your first bus tour?
No, this is my second actually. I did one just before COVID hit with Black Tiger Sex Machine. We did two out of the 3 months that we were booked for. And then everything went to shit, in end of February type thing.
Right.
So yeah, it's my second experience through, and it's, which is kind of nice because it's definitely less daunting, I suppose. But it's like the first one was so just exciting and everything was new and it was super cool. And I got to cover like the whole freaking country, you know what I mean? And that was so beneficial.
The bus tour, there's nothing like it, man. I love bus tours so much. It's like,
same,
just such a weird, singular experience that I think is really hard to tell someone about. If it's one of those things I think you kind of have to just experience.
I think it is, yeah. I mean, especially the camaraderie of like the completely random people that you end up spending months with in close confinement. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy how we figure out how to make it work. And because we have like 11 people on the bus and we're all sleeping, toe to toe to each other and like every night for however long. And we all get along, more or less just fine. And there's no like crazy, which I think that's pretty crazy. You know what I mean?
It is, man. Yeah. Cause it's not always, you're not necessarily, I mean, maybe if you're the headliner, but even then you're not necessarily choosing every single person who's going to be living with you on that bus. And certainly not if you're an opener or anything. You just got to deal with a whole bunch of personalities. Some people you probably wouldn't hang around otherwise. But you're right. Nope. You do make it work and it becomes this kind of weird little family.
Yeah. I mean, it's super character building. I reckon that's probably the thing there. You know what I mean?
That's a good word for it.
Yeah. It's great though. It's great. It's definitely like a life experience that is, invaluable for sure.
When did you come to the States? Like, when did you move here?
It was the start of 2019. So I think it was like March 2019.
Oh, so still pretty recent.
I mean, when I think about it, it just feels like so much has happened over the past, 3 years that it feels like I've been here forever. And I had been coming over the 2018 as well. Like I think I did 3 trips in 2018 to do shows and all that kind of thing because I had my visa. So yeah, it feels like I've been coming back and forth, but I officially moved, like 2019. And then COVID hit and I actually went back home for 9 months last October and came back in last year, sorry. So I was gone for a pretty solid chunk of that because nothing was kind of happening. Yeah. But then, my agent was just like, Q3, let's go. It's all going down. And I'm like, all right, sweet. And rush back. But yeah, so it's been back and forth and realistically hasn't been that long of a time.
I mean, if we go back to Canberra and to, the DJ days, like how did you even get into DJing in the first place?
It was a friend. He was like, there's this super cool software on my computer where you can put 2 songs together. And I was like, oh, sweet. Okay. And so us just figuring out what a BPM was pretty exciting. and everything was like pretty much 128 BPM back then. I think.
What kind of stuff were you listening to back then?
The stuff I was always listening to Pendulum before all of this as like my like gateway, I suppose. I didn't realize that they were necessarily electronic music at the time. I was just like, this is just fucking sick, because it was like part of like my brother had this like stack of CDs, and it was the Metallica and Pearl Jam and Nirvana and Tool and A Perfect Circle, and then Pendulum was in there as well, and they're an Australian band, so I'm assuming that's kind of why it was a thing. But that was always like my first experience of electronic music. But I was also listening to these compilation CDs by Ministry of Sound that we had. It was like Maximum Bass or something, and it was like hardstyle and like all of these things that I listen back now and I'm like, oh, this is like stuff that people would legitimately kind of like know about. And I think it was remixes of certain big songs and stuff like that. Yeah. And then it was kind of getting into, I suppose when I first started DJing, it was a lot of the old, just 2010 to 13 golden era, like But Be More, like that song Mars is always such a fucking big one that stuck in my head, like old Afrojack, Fake Blood, like Afrojack, old stuff like that. It was all, just great 128 stuff. But then there was like Skrillex and everything he was bringing in the other BPM, and we were just like, how the fuck do I mix this? And I was,
right.
I didn't know how to mix anything but house at this point. But yeah, so it was kind of like figured all that out. And I don't know, I just remember how exciting it was when you were like, because I didn't necessarily know about like key mixing and stuff back then, but like when you put two together and they kind of just like worked melodically, and you're sitting there fucking mind blown at just like how this works, and you're just like, this is such a crazy like coincidence or whatever, and it's like sweet, and it was just so addicting. So it was kind of went from there, I guess.
And was your local scene, was it all kind of revolving around the one club? Like, how big was the local scene?
The local scene in Canberra there was one big club which was called Academy, and that was my fucking hub. And I always like, that's still my sort of home. They've changed names since then, but like that's the club for me. But then there was other places that were around, this other main one that was kind of more undergroundy, that was doing like the trap that was kind of coming in, and the dubstep and like that sort of sound. And like, we'd be able to play like, old Fox Pavilion and like the new Skrillex stuff and the old like Bauer stuff like there. And it was called, at the time it was called Clubhouse. And it was like, a tiny room that would fit maybe 200 people in there, and it was sick. Whereas Academy, I actually don't know what the cap was in the end, but it's, it's a 500 room, and that was big for us. It was like really tall ceilings. It was an old theater. It had a couple levels, like, big screen. It was great. So yeah, we'd have that. And that was, back then, it was absolutely bumping for sure.
Were there a lot of, like, I'm just trying to picture it. Were there a lot of other DJs? Was anyone making music? Like, was there a local star?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was definitely a few DJs at that point in time. There was an influx of DJs because of just the EDM thing becoming more of a thing, and DJing becoming a little bit more accessible. Like, and over that time, it definitely became like, everybody was a effing DJ. But like, there was only a few of us making music wise. We had, I don't know if you heard of Peking Duck.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So those guys were like, the big boys back in the day. They'd come and do a night and sell out a room, and it was like so much fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like they were definitely the kings back in the day, and we would all just kind of, look up to them. But I mean, there was, I think maybe like 10 of us all doing different things.
It's kind of beautiful, man. I mean, just the small, the little communities part of it, because we to some extent we had that in the States too. Back 10 years ago, where it was still a little more regional, and still, all the local scenes were so well defined and so different from each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Is there anything from that? Do you miss any of that, like smaller, more like DIY kind of feeling stuff?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that's why it's kind of fun going to all of these different places around the States and doing the things like the bus tours and going to your C markets and all that kind of stuff, and like kind of being a part and witnessing that again. It definitely is interesting for sure. I mean, like, I definitely feel like I did my time with that, so I don't necessarily miss it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's so much ahead of me right now that, like, there's no real time to be looking back necessarily, but I don't really miss that as such, but it is really cool to re-experience that and kind of get an ego check with that sort of shit and be like, this is super fucking cool because that's where I was back in the day as well. And it's just like being able to give advice to those guys when they come and ask for it is it's nice because you just go like, savor the shit because like, you know, you don't need to be in a rush, I suppose. It'll happen if you just do your thing and work, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. And I guess that's even outside of music, that's what, you know, older people always tell younger people is, you know, these are the best years, enjoy it, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's one of those eternal like ironies that young people can never appreciate it while they have it.
100%.
But
100%. It is though. But I mean, like, it's like it's the whole journey. Everything's a journey. Like you don't need to find that destination. Because when you do, like, it's funny because like even now it's like when you do get to that destination, when you do reach that goal, when you do like play that show or meet that person or whatever, it's like, that, now what? Like, you know what I mean? Like it's never as like gigantically life-changing as what you think it's going to be. And so like, you just, you're
the same person. Your life is the same.
You are,
like,
exactly. And you just be in that moment. I think like that's just the mantra. But I mean, like it just takes time to really learn that and experience.
Well, how was it for you? I mean, between Australia and the US, I've talked to other Australian artists who felt like at a certain point in their career, they were hitting a ceiling and started feeling constricted or confined, wanted to break out of Australia a little bit. Did you have those kind of feelings? How are you with just generally the goal orientedness of this career, the anxiety of always trying to get the next thing, all of that?
Right. Interesting. I mean, everything has felt like it's happened pretty fluidly. Like it felt like it has taken a pretty long time, but it still felt like it happened pretty fluidly. Like I never felt static at any point. And I didn't feel, the transition from going like from Australia to the States was like, I started in Canberra, did a whole bunch of time there, had a whole lot of fun. Didn't really know what my next step was until I met my manager. And I had a really good friend who was also like doing music, and he was always just like really good like pushing me to meet people and like do things and like kind of like be active in the community a little bit more. And so I ended up meeting my manager by showing him music and stuff, and it was like sick. And then he was from Sydney, who's Pat, my guy.
I know Pat a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. And then he's been amazing ever since then, like super ground root shit. Like we started the project together type thing. And then he was always like, your music lives in the States. Like we need to go to the States. And I was like, sweet. I'm very much like a go with the flow kind of guy. And, I'm like, okay, if that's the thing we got to do, then that's what we got to do. And so we ended up, taking time over the next like 2 years, figuring out how to make that work. My music is always better received in the States, I think, for the most part, just because there's, a bigger scene for what I do here. And there's a shit ton more people, obviously. So it's like kind of the obvious move. So he was just very good at making those things just kind of happen. And not stalling and not being like, should we do this or whatever? It's just like, no, this is like what we have to do, and sweet. So yeah, then I came over here, and it was super exciting and whatever. And we had an agency, like we were with UTA for the move, and things just kind of kept rolling from there, and we're still moving forward like crazy. So yeah.
Well, and I mean, that sounds pretty ideal overall. What do you attribute to that flow, to that sort of just steady success? Like, what are you doing differently that
I wish I knew,
some others people might not be doing? Is it just persistence, hard work?
I wish I knew. I've always said that, like, if I'm doing something in my life, like it's the only, like I'm, 100% doing it. Like I'm not questioning it. Like I've always kind of said that because I know that some people are, a little more hesitant to dive into stuff. I guess I was blessed in the fact that I wasn't tied down to a whole lot when I was doing anything, you know what I mean? So like I didn't have this 9-to-5 job that I was stuck with that I needed to like worry about if I was to do music, if I was to do like anything that I was doing. Cause I was a track cyclist back in the day, like during school. And I was like trying to go to the Olympics and do all that kind of thing. And so like I was never in this kind of 9-to-5 thing, or like I was never kind of tied down in that sense to something. So I was like, if I'm doing this, this is what I'm doing. And my parents were super supportive of it and would kind of just help me do it and kind of like accommodate whatever it was. And so my mindset, I'm like I said, I'm more or less a very free flowing kind of guy. And so I think my mindset in that sense has kind of helped just let the universe do its thing.
Right.
As woo-woo as that sounds, like it's my only explanation, because it's just giving off the right energy, finding the right people, and then letting those steps kind of take their place. Like I said, I feel like this has been a long stretch and a long haul, but I'm like okay with that at the same time. Like I'm not trying to force anything, because like the biggest thing for me was like in my whole life was like, don't force it. If you have to force it, it's probably not right. And my manager was the same. It's all about setting up opportunities as opposed to like trying to force it down their throat sort of thing. So yeah. I think that that's done me well in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's absolutely the right attitude to have. But it must have also been cut. You have to have a crazy work ethic. If you're talking about like, trying to get to the Olympics, if that was the level you were on before you were in music, I have to assume that your work ethic must be pretty out there.
For sure. I mean, like I say, when I was like, if I'm doing something 100%, then I'm doing it. It's like I'm not second guessing what needs to be done necessarily. It's like, this is the thing. Like my dad and I, like my dad, thank God for him. He would get up at sort of 4:30 in the morning and take me to cycling training in the gym and doing all that kind of stuff before school. And then I'd, stay up and do schoolwork and then train in the morning again and just kind of do that every day. So maybe that sort of stuff sort of set me up. But like I say, if I was in love with the thing, like there was nothing else. Like that was what you were doing. And it was the same with music. I ended up finding that, like I was doing graphic design for a little bit and sort of did that as well. And then I was a barista and kind of like that almost took over everything at one point. Really? I was just like, I'm going to run a cafe and like a restaurant. Yeah, I love making coffee. Like it was like my thing for ages.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then, then the music thing. And I was like, all right, this is it. This is what's happening. And then things just,
are you the kind of person place where if a new interest comes in, you kind of hyper focus on that and then everything that came before it just sort of goes away?
I used to be, absolutely. I think now I'm more aware of life generally, and I know that I can't just do that as such.
Yeah.
My brother is very much like that. And it's so funny whenever he finds something, he's like 10 years older than me, but it's just funny. Like whenever he finds something, he's just like, this is whether it be like gold panning or like making flying RC airplanes and like all that kind of stuff. It's kind of inspiring to be honest. I'm just like the love and like the obsessiveness is really cool because I feel like that's something that I want to kind of get back is being super obsessed with whatever it is that I'm kind of doing. But I do have other hobbies for sure that kind of go around. But yeah.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, man. I mean, was there something with the cycling? If you were serious on that, like Olympic hopeful level, what happened to knock you off of that track? No pun intended.
No, yeah. So, I mean, like it was really great for quite a few years. I would think I was doing it from like 15 till about 17 and a half type thing. It kind of crossed over with me finding music in a way because the way that the age groups worked in this whole thing was, and because my birthday's in December, so it's, automatically makes me a lot younger than a lot of other people, but it was like under 15s, under 17s. I think there was an under 19s and then there was like opens.
Okay.
And by the stage, I was like still 17 and I was versing like by the next age, like that next age bracket, I was versing like Olympians and I just couldn't hold up like, that was the caliber of who I was competing against. And I was still like this scrawny, like, I don't know what it is in pounds, but like 70 kilogram guy that needed to be 90 kilograms and the power to weight ratio thing. And I still had a lot of growing to do and like, turning 17, turning 18, going into like getting a new car and like going into that realm of life definitely kind of, I think set that back a little bit for me. So it was kind of a sad realization in a way. And like, definitely held on to my bike for about, I think 6 or 7 years. I didn't end up getting rid of it because I was like, nah, I'm not ready to let go of this yet. But like, you know, it was definitely one of those things. I was the only track cyclist, really like hyper focused, like sprinter. Cause I was like, give me 200 meters and I'm done. Like,
interesting.
And in that sense, I was training very much on my own. Like it was very solitary, like, and that was, I guess it got hard after a while because, you know, when you're a teenager, you're a social being and you need acceptance and you need all those sorts of things. And I suppose that was hard because I didn't fit into certain cliques and all of that kind of thing. So yeah, it made it hard in that sense.
I do think there is something to that competitiveness, to that having a work ethic instilled early on that I think is very helpful to this kind of career.
I think so. I totally agree. Like it needs it because especially with what we do, there's no hours. Like it's not like you're doing this to then and you can stop now. Like, I mean, you can set that for yourself, and I think I did, and I think that's super healthy to do. But at the same time, like we're never stopping realistically. So it's like if we can get in that mindset and live that, then you'll be fine. But it's just like you can't be like, oh yeah, this I've done like my 30 hours to the week, like I'm sort of done.
Right. Yeah.
Like that's not what's gonna.
Well, and on the flip side of that, do you ever burn out on it, or how do you avoid getting burnt out on it?
Yeah. So there is. I mean, COVID was one of those things where it was really great to have that break because I went crazy for the first 3 weeks of it, I think, trying to like just not stopping, like learning the whole Twitch thing, writing a shit ton of music, and like, but also not like there was so much outside of the actual creative and writing music aspect that just like cooked me because I'm like, this is too much. All I want to do is write. But I think learning how that, because I burnt the fuck out after that. Like I had to but I was terrified to take like 2 or 3 days off. You know what I mean? Like the guilt from that was awful. And I was like, okay, there's a lesson here for sure. So it was from then that I decided I needed to like start scheduling things and like actually give myself time off and be okay with that. And that like mental, I guess, acceptance was a big part of, you know, learning things moving forward. So I definitely overdid that for about 6 months. I was just like, everything was to the hour, like, you know, or minute necessarily. And like, I couldn't, you know, so I did that for like crazy. And now I'm on the other side of that and I can be a little bit more lenient, but I understand the importance of it now. So I think that's where that kind of balance comes in. So when you say, like, do you get hyper focused on shit? It's stuff like that where I go balls deep in it and just like go overboard and then, okay, reel it back. And now I kind of get it at a better perspective. Yeah.
Well, that's a good balance to find, man. And I think it's something you'll be adjusting throughout the course of your career, right? Like it's impossible
100%.
to find the perfect balance.
100%. I think the adjustment and the being able to adapt thing generally in this scene is like so unbelievably important.
Well, I love that you brought up adapting because it's something I wanted to talk to you about. Because when I first heard your music and first like kind of just understood what your project was kind of when that mid-tempo bass sound was really on the rise. And, you know, you were there and Rezz, obviously, and you put out a tune with Rezz and, you know, and then there were a bunch of people, still are a bunch of people in that scene. But I feel like you managed to sort of transcend that label, that like mid-tempo bass label into more of just a fully fledged artist that makes whatever you feel like. And right. I wanted to talk to you about that. Was that like a conscious transition? Did you feel that? Did you feel like you were getting labeled that? Because I think a lot of people were not able to escape that label. And I feel like that scene was, you know, exploded for a second. But then after that subsided, there weren't a ton of people left. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Totally see that and get that. It was like like you say, it was like kind of like it kind of burnt out as fast as it ignited. And then I could definitely see that as much as I didn't want it to like actually be a thing. It was like, because I really loved it at that point in time. And I still do. It's just, it was really difficult to like innovate. And there wasn't many people that was like doing things that were like really, really exciting. And so I think we were able to kind of like see that early on. And I knew the whole idea of Blanke as well was to be diverse and was to be able to adapt, and like the whole blank canvas, like be as open as I possibly can. And this was one of those moments where I didn't necessarily intend to like jump into this mid-tempo thing. Like it just kind of happened. And a lot of people sort of found out about mid-tempo through me and through Rezz and through 1788L and that kind of thing. And that was fantastic. But I was also like, I never wanted to be one genre artist. And that was, I think, the ethos and the mantra that helped me kind of move on from that. Cause I was like, I'm going to keep making other stuff, even though people might not really see it. But that's also been the hardest thing as well with the project for me personally, like, because I know that changing genres can alienate fans. And so that has always kind of terrified me. It's like, if I do this other thing, will the other fans be like, fuck this isn't that, I don't want to borrow this anymore. And I think it's taken me a long time to get to a point where I feel like I'm skilled enough to be able to do all of these different things just as well as the other thing that I was doing, to make the fans go, okay, like he's a legitimate artist that can be multiple things at the one time.
Right.
And I think that's been the idea, because, the adaptability thing, to make this a long-term thing, that's what's going to be key. And it's also going to be like, I don't know, for my creativity, I want to be able to do these things and to be able to set my brand up so that it is that, and it's not just, the brand is to be able to do everything. That's kind of the goal there, as opposed to being like, I'm just a mid-tempo artist. And then when I want to do a dubstep song, like that's the end of the world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a tightrope, man, because you're absolutely right. You want whatever your project is to be adaptable and flexible and expandable and changeable, so that, it can kind of evolve with you as an artist, and as people listening to you are evolving and changing too. But then, of course, you do have to sort of at each individual moment, shape it and give it an identity. And it's a hard thing to do, man, to make it so that, you can keep that sense of change and flexibility, but still, have something that people can connect with and identify with.
That's absolutely it. I mean, that was the scary part, is to be able to hold on to, or have something that's strong enough for people to, as you say, to hang on to, regardless of what you're doing. That's for me, I feel like that's definitely been like a struggle, and something that I've been trying to, work towards and try to figure out. At least I think now it's starting to really get to that stage where I'm getting more comfortable with what I'm making and where I'm sitting and the sound that I have and like all of that kind of thing. And I think that's definitely going to solidify over the next year and a half, 2 years.
For me, when I heard your Change and Decay EP that you did with Deadbeats, that was, I mean, I had been following your music for a while at this point, but that to me felt like a big, maybe inflection point, or it just felt like you had been cooking for a while before that EP. Like it felt like maybe a new side of you I hadn't seen yet. Did it? Right. Did that EP? I don't know. Maybe it just connected with me strongly. For you, did that feel like a production leveling up kind of point?
I think back then I was definitely at a point where, like, every month, every 3 months, I was feeling like, this new thing is better than what I did like, last month, and I was still at that really rapid growth stage. But yeah, I guess Change and Decay, especially like the first one, both of them were to sort of present the diversity thing as well, because there was like halftime stuff, D&B stuff, like mid-tempo, and then it was kind of like showing these different aspects. I guess it was that for sure. It wasn't like meditated necessarily, but it definitely felt like that.
Do you feel like you've evolved as a producer pretty steadily as this has gone on? Have there been any moments or any light bulb switch flipping kind of things that really changed the game for you?
The light bulb moments for me have almost always been collaborating with other artists, funnily enough, because I never really did that initially for the first like few years of my career, if you want to call it that. It was like always kind of like getting in with the studio with people, or like working with other people and seeing what they do and seeing what I really liked about what they did and what I didn't like. And just the pure fact of getting a different perspective on, because when you're learning on, in an unstructured environment like YouTube or like books or like whatever. You're doing this in a totally different lane to somebody else. And then the way you see them work is like, it's such an eye opener. So I found that I did learn lots of things just by working with other people. So collaborating is one of the things that I always tell people to go out and do. It's like, what advice do you have? It's like, go work with other people, go collaborate. It's good for you. It's good for like your mentality. It's good for like your work ethic. It's good to see like what other people do. And it's good for your skill set.
Yeah. It's the only way, I think. It's so many people just watch tutorials online, but to me, watching tutorials, which is great, but that's like the pretend version of collaborating with someone,
Right. Yeah, exactly.
It's like if you're actually sitting in the studio working together, at least for me, I can synthesize that information of watching somebody do something so much faster when I'm actually involved in the process.
100%, especially like, I mean, especially when you sit in with, it's a skill set in itself. Being in the room with someone else, like that's an ever evolving thing where you need to figure out how to actually do that. And that's hard. Being creative with someone else in the room is like, unless you're a very open, like whatever person, like it is really difficult to kind of like be vulnerable in that sense. And be like, I am good enough to be in this room. Like, and they're not judging me in that way. Like we can relax.
Right.
That's a hard thing to kind of overcome.
How did it start for you working with other people? Like, how did that track with Rezz come about?
A lot of the time with those bigger artists, it was them approaching me saying, "Hey, like let's work on something," type thing, which is always a kind of mind blowing experience because I was like, "What? Why?" So yeah, but like I remember when I worked with 1788L, he was just starting his project and stuff, and he was sending me music and being like, "Hey, what do you think?" And I was like, "This is really cool." And then after a while, we finally sort of collabed once we'd just gotten that, I guess, relationship going. So it can come about in any way, shape or form. But I think that's another one of those other things that I tell people is like, try and get, in contact with people. It doesn't have to be like, "Hey, let's make a song." It's just like, just make your face known sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whether it be online, whether it be DMs or whatever. It's like, that's always just a good start.
Yeah. I think it's almost better that way to not start off with like, let's work or let's build or whatever it is.
Oh, no.
And just to make a human connection first and then let it be whatever it's going to be.
Yeah, 100%. That's definitely the most natural and like organic way to do it is to, try and make that actual like sort of human connection first.
Yeah. I think it's almost, there's no other way to realistically do it because it's so obvious. Like I can tell in 2 seconds if someone's approaching me because they want me to do something or want some result benefit for themselves, which is fine. Like it's fine if that's what they're doing, but I can tell that immediately,
Right. Yeah, exactly. You can tell the sincerity and it's very transparent pretty quickly.
I mean, it seems like a lot of the big names that you've done, Rezz, you've done remixes for all these people, RL Grime, Maoki, Marshmello, Illenium, like all that kind of thing. How did can you put your finger on something you were doing that like made all these people start paying attention to you? Was it?
I mean, like, yeah. Funnily enough, I think the rise of the mid-tempo stuff did help. Like, it was literally just them hearing stuff online. Like, I don't think I actually sent these people music. My manager is a huge part of this. I mean, like to the remixes, he was definitely putting in the work and getting in front of these teams and saying like, "Hey, this is the kind of music that we're doing, and I hope you like it. Like, consider us for remixes," type thing. So he was obviously a huge point in this journey.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was just kind of like making myself, aware enough online and just putting out the music at the time. And it was just like a couple of things fell into place, especially with like Illenium, same thing. Like they pretty much just cold DM'd me saying, "Hey, like, love the music, send me some stuff," type thing. And I was able to send them more music. And then after a while, it was kind of like, "Hey, do you like this song?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's pretty cool." And it's like, "Sweet, you want to jump on it?" And I'm like, "Oh,
you're right."
Yeah. So honestly, it's definitely a wild experience. But yeah, remix wise, it was more the management side, getting in front of the teams and and the labels and all that kind of thing, and being like, "Hey, consider we're here, we exist."
And I think that's the kind of thing that can snowball if you can execute one or two of them well. That kind of thing can snowball too.
That's 100% correct.
Which is another important thing. We're talking a lot about building the career and keeping momentum and all of that. I think it's executing well when the opportunity arises that I think is so much more important than actually digging up the opportunity itself,
Right. Yeah. Making sure you can deliver is, I mean, not to put pressure on the situation, but yeah, it helps for sure.
Yeah. Well, and there will always be more, of course, but it's just like what we were talking about at the start of this when we were talking about kind of building sample banks for songwriting. If you can put yourself in a position to just be more efficient, to just not be in your head about whatever the task is, that's always, because you can never, same way you can never anticipate when creativity is going to strike, you can't always anticipate when an opportunity is going to open up. And just, if you've been doing the work up until that point, that's, I think, the best position you can put yourself in.
Like you say, 100%. If you're like setting yourself up, that's the best possible thing you can do. I mean, the EP that I've got coming up is a similar sort of thing. The way that the writing came about is, I didn't really have anything. And then I set myself up and was able to like lock myself away in a studio for 2 weeks. And then like I did the most writing I've like ever done within that time. I was able to pump out, 10, 11 songs, and then be able to like cut that down into the EP that it is now. And it's like, the only reason why is because I set myself up to kind of like be in that position and like to set my environment that way. But as you say, like creativity kind of comes whenever the hell it wants to. But I think it's like, giving yourself that opportunity and being in front of it is what's important to be able to grab that moment.
Yeah, 100%, man. What's the deal with the new EP? Are there more details you can share? Like, what does it sound like? Who is it coming out with? Anything like that?
Yeah. So this one's with Ophelia. So I'm doing like a full EP with Ophelia, which is really exciting. So it's going to be a lot of melodic music. There's a lot of like, this is the most like melodic music. I mean, it's the biggest piece of work that I put out, which is extremely exciting. And it's the most like sort of songwriting stuff that I've done and most amount of vocalists that I've worked with. And it's, it's balanced out with a couple of heavy songs as well, which is super cool. But I think, it's worked with a lot of really cool artists on this one, but I'm just excited to be putting out like this side of me as like a body of work. Because like EP wise, I haven't done a whole lot in that sense. It's always been like either singles or whatever. And to be able to write like a piece, like a whole body is, I feel like a very different experience. And it was super cool to be able to like put the time into that. So yeah, it's going to be melodic and heavy and singy, and I don't know, it's a good time.
No, that's great, man. And you've been doing some singing of your own recently too, right? I mean, I definitely gave it a crack, and it worked out for the better, surprisingly. So I'm happy with that came out. But I mean, yeah. So on Breathe, like my drum and bass song Breathe, I ended up singing those words and those lyrics in my sister's basement, and I was like, I need a vocalist, but I don't know what to do here. And I was like, I've always loved Rob Swire and like Metric, and they sound very similar, like vocal tone wise. And I was like, I wonder if I can somehow get inspiration from that and try and implement it into my own thing. And somehow it worked to some degree. Do you think you'll do more of it?
Yeah. I'm definitely going to keep cracking at that and like try and make it better. I don't know whether I'm probably going to do vocal lessons or something just to try and make that a little bit easier on my, but yeah, it was great. It was so much fun to be able to like get in that songwriting mode for myself and then express it in my own way, as opposed to like working with somebody else and doing it through them. It was just like a very different experience. Yeah,
no, I'm sure that was super, super rewarding, man. It's
it was cool. Like, I mean, like it was funny because it was supposed to be like the initial demo was just supposed to be a scratch thing, and I didn't tell my manager or the label that it was me, and I was just sort of uploaded it on SoundCloud. I was like, hey, here's this. Like, let me know what you think. And they're like, this is sick. This is like really good. I'm like, and they're like, who's the vocalist? I'm just like, it's me. I'm like, and I was like, I said yay, but I also said shit. Now I need to actually do this.
Right. Yeah, it's one more thing to add on to the list, I guess. But it's good, man. I think it's awesome that you took that step. Well, and that also, we didn't talk about your drum and bass project either yet,
Right.
which is it Aeon or Eon?
It's Aeon, yeah.
Aeon,
it's Aeon. Yeah.
Which is interesting, but in the context of talking about how the Blanke project is a blank canvas where you can do whatever you want, why make then a separate D&B side project?
Well, it was the deliberation over whether we do legitimately create like an entirely new, like start socials from scratch, do all of that and do a entirely new brand, or if we just have it as like a subset from Blanke. And still, it is still Blanke, but it's like just a definition of something else. So it's like if I went and did like a full drum and bass EP as Blanke, it wouldn't we felt like that was like a little bit too left of field.
Right.
Whereas if we did this, was able to label it as a new name, but not completely new branding, it's still got the connection of me and like Blanke as a whole project. But gives the definition of like, saying that, hey, this is something different, expect something different.
The D&B thing is interesting to me because there's been so much talk in the last year or two of, D&B is having a moment, everybody's excited about it. But then, I look back at like the original, the D&B pioneers, the people who have been holding it down for forever, and it doesn't seem like they're necessarily getting any of that love.
No, yeah, it's
like
it's
what's your relationship to drum and bass in general? I mean, obviously, if you were listening to Pendulum early on, it's got to be baked in from a young age.
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember the very first things I just tried to produce was drum and bass for like the first few months of me like picking up Logic. It was me trying to figure out how to fucking do that, and I was like, okay, this is way too complicated. I need to make some house or something. Yeah. So there was, technically I started out as a drum bass producer. No, not really. But yeah, so it's funny at the moment too, because like people are like, yeah, it's having a moment, but at the same time, I'm like, it's having a slow moment for sure. I feel like, because like I say, it's always been around, like it's always been there. I think just the States, it needs to, there's a polarizing kind of thing here where people are like, it's going to ruin my night if you play it, or yeah, this is great, like bring that shit on.
Right.
So that is also kind of a reason why we need to separate it, because here, like if I'm to do a drum and bass tour or like, show or whatever, it needs to have this like expectation. Like I can't rock up as Blanke and be like, cool, I'm playing drum and bass for an hour.
Right.
Like it's gonna divide the room at this point in time anyway. And the whole idea is to try and bridge that gap. I remember like in Australia, it works really well. Like I'm able to do headline shows that are 90 minutes and I can do literally half of it as drum and bass, and it works really, really well. I did a whole drum and bass tour in New Zealand before I came back to America.
New Zealand goes crazy for drum and bass.
Bro, it's on their like main radio stations. Like it's the coolest thing.
So cool.
Yeah, it was wild. So I went and did like a 2-week tour with like Dimension and Culture Shock and like Danny Bird and just like really big guns. I was able to like get in with them, and Dimension was the same in saying that, we want to bring this to America. Like we want to be the reason why. And I'm like, this is great. Like this is going to be a really cool movement if we can get this going. Because the stuff that he's making, I find is very accessible.
Oh yeah.
So I think it is a matter of time. I don't know what the next step is necessarily. I think it's just exposure. And I suppose that's what's cool about, people like Reaper, for example, and me in a sense is that we're in the EDM realm, bringing this drum bass to them. Whereas the guys in the UK are very much in the UK and like very much like in that realm, trying to bring it over here. So I feel like there is work for both of us to collaborate and work together on bringing it over here to kind of make it more of a thing in the scene. But I think I didn't realize how different it was for people to like kind of grasp.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Because to me, it's all kind of the same in my brain,
I mean, in a way, yeah, for sure. But one of the sentiments I always hear is kind of like people can't dance to it. So I'm like, maybe I should do like a Twitch stream and show people how to just fucking two-step. Like, all you gotta do is,
I would love to see you do not a production tutorial, but a dance tutorial.
Totally, dude. But that's it. It's like, we can't headbang to this. I'm like, you're not meant to. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You just gotta sway and feel it. But it's funny. I remember like seeing Skrillex's Mothership tour at like Red Rocks or whatever it was, and just the way the crowd moved blew back in 2010. It was such a different thing. No one was sitting there like headbanging necessarily. It was very just vibey.
Yeah.
And like you had to I don't know. I just thought that was like such a fascinating
Well, that's where where dubstep came from, man. Like dubstep, the dub in dubstep comes from dub reggae. Like it was originally from the UK and very much based around like reggae rhythms. It was not the OG dubstep, like the real actual original dubstep. It's not aggressive at all.
No. It's very vibey, very like up and down, kind of like the syncopated offbeat, like jink, the skanky guitars,
very
and like all that kind of shit. Yeah,
like clouds of weed smoke, that kind of thing.
Exactly. I mean, that's what's so cool, like how we can see like things and genres that like evolve. Like that's a fucking amazing thing. That it's funny how aggressive it can turn into, what I mean?
It's crazy. I mean, that's our fault, man. That's America's fault.
I'm pandering to it as well. So
and obviously, like we were talking earlier, we both grew up listening to metal. Like I love aggressive music. There's a huge part of me that is all about aggressive music, but it is always weird to me. And maybe again, this is just DJ brain, when I get frustrated with crowds sometimes if I'm not being careful, of just being like, well, I understand why all this music is connected. Like, why can't you,
Right.
But then I think that's
interesting.
The real answer to that is that, if they're not getting it, then I'm not doing my job well enough.
But that's the thing. It's like, where is the line between like DJ and producer and like performer? Because they're all different things. Like where we came from as a DJ is not a producer.
It's
like,
true.
you know what I mean? Like, you're as DJing is our medium as a producer to perform and to play. Like that, until we get into like the more like live aspects, like a San Holo or I guess like a Rufus de Sol or something like that, where you're up there playing things and like actually make things happen. Maybe that's like more of a performance as opposed to a DJ set. But it was funny, that transition from like DJing and playing what the crowd wanted and trying to find that point of, hey, where do I start playing more of my own stuff? Are they going to care? Is this now more of an artist project? Like, are people getting that? And am I able to, it was such I feel like it's very unique in like the way that
in this time period we're talking about, from when you started to where you are now, I think you probably saw or experienced a lot of that transition, because that was, the rise of the producer first, DJ second kind of thing. That was, it was the tail end of Bloghouse, the start of EDM. It was kind of like the early, like 2009 to 2011 kind of period, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was definitely a crazy time. I mean, so like as a producer, you can definitely see people coming through as, just from their bedroom straight to the DJ set. And it's kind of like a big shock. But I mean, they can go, because you can build up your fan base online now. You can just do that now. Like you can go straight from the bedroom to the stage.
Yeah. It makes me curious, man, for you, how did you catch on in the first place? Like when you first started making music and posting music online and all of that, was there something early that caught a spark? Was there something that, gave you some hope that like, hey, there might be something here to keep pushing?
I don't know. I feel like because I was DJing and I was the resident at the club that I was playing at, I think that helped a lot. I think that helped me continue going because I was able to experience what it was like to play live. And that as a spark personally, I think helped a lot. And then it was obviously like I had some sort of name in the town that I was growing up in. But I mean, internationally, it started, when I started putting music on SoundCloud, obviously, and just passing it around to everybody. But I think like the mid-tempo thing and like, the virtual self flip that I did ages ago, that sounds like that was where a lot of people kind of caught on initially. Like you said, that's where you kind of found it. And that's the sentiment that I got for a long time. So yeah, I think that's kind of where it all came from.
Which is interesting, right? Because that's not some plan you executed. That's just being in the right place at the right time, making something you're excited about.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. And that's what it was. I was like, holy shit, I haven't heard anything like this before. I think I'm onto something here. This is great. So, and I'm just stoked it gave me a bit more of a platform for sure.
Yeah,
like
man.
after that.
I love hearing you say that, because that's what I wish more new artists would do, is just, you take that risk of like, I haven't heard anything that sounds like this. I think it's cool. Maybe other people will think it's cool. Because I think 9 times out of 10, you might be wrong about that feeling. Like maybe it's something nobody's ever heard before because nobody wants to hear it. There's plenty of experiments and risks that don't go anywhere. But the only way you can stand out, like we were talking about, you transcending that whole movement or hype or whatever, is kind of by chasing that excitement, right? And saying like, no, I just think this is cool, and I'm going to keep following what I think is cool.
Absolutely. And that's definitely the move. And as you say, it's like a scary risk to take, because just like, I don't know if this is going to be received well, or whatever the sentiment is. But then if it does catch on, then like, it could be the next fucking big thing. It's just like, it's all about, having the balls to take the risk regardless, even just creativity. Like you don't have to release it, but I know that myself personally, you almost don't want to waste time when you're creating, when you're like producing. So it's like, it's a scary concept sometimes to try and create something different.
Yeah.
Because it's like, what if it doesn't work? What if this sucks? And I've just wasted the past 3 hours of my life. But it's also like, you definitely can't think that way, because that could be, your next little thing. And I think you need to give yourself space and time for experimentation. Some people are really good at that and some people definitely aren't. I know I wasn't for a while there for sure.
In what way? Like you'd be afraid to go too far out of the boundaries?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's just like you're afraid to go out of, the boundaries of like your sound that you think you've like put together, or like what you think people are going to really care about, or like, I need to make this specific thing because it's like the big thing at this point in time, whether it be like, future bass or like tear out dubstep or like whatever it is. There's definitely a kind of like creative block or creative like wall that you need to, I think, beat down so you can just get out there and just create and not be confined by what other people think is going to be cool or whatever, because you just don't know what people are going to think realistically. To be able to follow your own intuition when it comes to that stuff is like so powerful, I think.
Yeah, I love that you say you really never know what other people are going to think. No matter how sure you are this is the hit or that this is going to go crazy, you have no idea, and nobody does.
Nobody does. No one does. It's so funny seeing like big artists and have humongous songs, and you just go, surely you knew this was like going to happen, right? They're just like, no fucking idea. Yeah. We thought it was going to be something else. Like, you know what I mean? So like,
Well, so many of the hits,
it's crazy how that happens.
You'll hear people say like, oh, I wrote that in 20 minutes, just like a weird joke idea.
Every time. Yeah. Every fucking time.
I remember talking to Flux Pavilion about, like his like bass cannon and all that. He was like, oh yeah, that was a joke. Like we were laughing in the studio,
Of course it was. Yeah, exactly. And now it's like the fucking most classic deep dubstep song.
Right, yeah. It's beautiful. There's something about that chaos that I really love of it, man. Of just like, yeah, all we can really do at the end of the day is try to have fun and try to reconnect with, why we liked this stuff in the first place. And at the end of the day, that's kind of like the only real formula for success, that plus hard work.
Totally. And I feel like, I need to be reminded of that often. So I'm glad we're talking about it, because that's a good click for me.
Well,
absolutely.
Well, as we're kind of wrapping up, man, I mean, how do you seem like a pretty, like this is the first time we've really gotten to talk, in not in DMs. Like you seem like a pretty even keeled, pretty easygoing, like generally happy person. How do you stay like that? Because this can be a stressful career. I mean, you mentioned you were trying to branch out other hobbies, that kind of thing. Like, is there anything you do to keep yourself happy and enjoying what you do?
I mean, I feel like there's definitely, I'm very much like a health nut, and I feel like that's something that I could go down a rabbit hole. Like we could have definitely spent a lot of time on this We still can, but
like what, like nutrition or exercise or what?
Just everything well-being, I suppose, and realizing that there is a balance to all of this. This is me personally, though. Like I know a lot of people don't pay attention to this side of thing, and they're still very successful in their music careers. But it's also like I don't know where they're at mentally and all that other side of things. You know what I mean? Like so, I don't know. But for me, yeah, it's definitely kind of like making sure that I have something outside of music that can separate me from it, so that when I do come back into it, you know, it is exciting and it is still like a great world to be in. Because if you just inundate yourself with it, like there is a point. There is definitely like an obsession, and like there's nothing wrong with that. And I think spending a shit ton of time just absolutely plowing through music and like learning all the things while you are obsessed with it is a great thing. But being aware of the fact that you can be burnt out and you can like have these mental blocks and all that kind of thing is good. So it's like I make sure that there are other things in my life that can separate it, whether it be like gardening or like I started rock climbing when I was back in Australia because my friend showed me and I'm like, this is like the coolest thing ever. I fucking love this. Realizing it, I mean, Colorado is a great spot for it too, but realizing, you know, a lot of other people are doing it is the coolest thing. And just, I don't know, separating your brain from it, from this, I think it was really important for me.
Yeah.
And like realizing what's important in life generally. And okay, so eating the right food was like a big one for me as well. I remember like I was partying and doing all that kind of thing from like 18 to 25 and things just started to go downhill after that. And I was like, okay, I need to like really kick myself back into gear because I was fatigued all the time. Like I couldn't think properly. I had brain fog was crazy. I was breaking out. I was, you know, that was one time in my life where I definitely wasn't like happy or whatever. And I was never that way inclined before that. So I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. And so I started seeing like a naturopath and she got me off a lot of the things that were unhealthy for me. And I just became hyper aware of what I was putting into my body and like what effect it had. And
like, are we talking about like food or booze or drugs? Like, what are we talking about?
All of the above. Yeah, all of the above for sure. Yeah. It's just like, it all has an impact. Like even like now, even for me, it is down to the point of food. Like I don't really drink that much anymore because of all of this and realizing, you know, I can't drink because if I feel like shit for 2 days, that's 2 days out of my productivity that's gone.
Yeah.
And I just am not in a good mental headspace for that anymore. And, you know, you can get stuck in that trap. Like if you're like, say, if you're back in Canberra and like, I'm, you know, whatever, you can get stuck and just going, okay, I'll just go out for another drink and like super easy to get stuck in that. So now it's like, yeah, I make sure I'm aware of what I'm eating and like eating well and sleeping properly and doing all that kind of thing so that I can do this efficiently and like at a good pace and like not stressing myself out and meditating like every day and making sure I'm like reading and helping my brain and other senses and all of that kind of stuff. I'm just obsessed with at the moment. And it's fun meeting like-minded people who are kind of into that as well and being able to like spread that because I had no idea. Like before I went to a naturopath, I had zero idea that like me eating rice was bad for my body because I wasn't listening to it. And that's like one of the reasons why I was like breaking out all the time and starch isn't like the best thing to have for me personally. So it's like, all right, cool. I can cut that out. And then all of a sudden I have energy again. It's like, it's crazy.
It is wild how what we eat, like you said, just anything we put into our bodies, how it can affect, you know, things you wouldn't necessarily expect. Like obviously people expect if you drink a bunch of booze, you're going to be hungover, but right. There's so much more to it than that. I've never seen a professional for that kind of thing, but I have for a long time always experimented with, you know, oh, well, what happens if I cut this out of my diet or,
right.
you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, I feel like I'm slowly getting there myself.
I feel like the big thing is experimentation with that though, because it's like, I got introduced to it and then it was kind of like my own rabbit hole from there. You kind of go, okay, cool. I'm going to do the fasts and start like intermittent fasting and like getting different, I don't know, doing like elimination diets and like really seeing like what this fucking food does to me. And because I mean, especially with the traveling, like I don't want to be feeling like shit all the time. And I don't know whether it's like certain people that have issues. Like I definitely is like some people have more issues with this than other people. And so like, I feel like I'm probably one of those people who needs to be more careful with it.
Right.
And so especially on a bus, for example, like I can't have pizza at 2 a.m. and be okay with that. Like it's just not something that I have that will give me longevity. So I need to prepare differently for that. And I know that the other guys like they just wouldn't be sort of aware of that. And they might be wondering why, after 2 weeks, they're completely burnt out and super tired. And like, cause you can ride that for a week and a week, 2 weeks of tour. Like you can do that, but it becomes a point where that doesn't become practical anymore. And your body goes, cool, I'm out. Like we need to figure this out.
Oh, yeah.
You need to start drinking.
Yeah. I mean, the capacity of the human body to take abuse is kind of amazing, but you do end up paying for it eventually,
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like because you can do it once, we're like, sweet, we're fine. Let's like keep going. And we don't realize the accumulation aspect of it all. And it's the same with like, I'm glad that I had like my mom and my sister along with this journey, because my sister was the one who got me onto like my naturopath, and they also have, certain issues or whatever it is. And so we are all like in this kind of boat together, and we can bounce back off each other. And the accumulation thing was one of the things. Like my mom was like, yeah, I can have like bread one day and it's like fine. But if I have bread 3 or 4 days in a row, like all of a sudden my world turns upside down.
Interesting.
And and it's definitely something that like, I guess isn't super obvious to people, especially just because like these days we are fed whatever and no one's really giving us guidelines on what these things are doing to us.
Yeah.
So it's not like, it's kind of a free for all in that sense. Like,
I mean, once you learn, you're right that this could be a whole separate podcast, but once you learn certain, how bad certain ingredients are, and then you start realizing that a lot of these ingredients are in, most shit that you buy in a store, it's wild, man. It's definitely takes some rewiring of your brain.
It does. It really does. And just like willpower to kind of like say, okay, I'm not going to do this because everyone else is.
That's true.
But then
too.
Also not being like some nutrition Nazi and saying you shouldn't be doing this because no one wants to listen to you when you kind of like that. It's more just like leading by example in a way, and just be like, I do this because of this.
Yeah,
you don't have to.
Some people can go crazy, man, and they're fine. I guess I'm jealous of those people, but they do exist.
Yeah, they absolutely do, and I'm like, all right, that's what I mean. Yeah, I feel like there's a few of those people around, especially in this industry, and just damn, I don't know how you're functioning. That's crazy.
Yeah, the legendary partiers of this industry, man. There's people who have been going wild for decades, and they're fine.
I think so. Anyway, maybe they're not.
Maybe they're not. You're right. maybe they're not.
Maybe we need to sit down and talk to them.
But their capacity for it, I couldn't even do it for that long. I don't know.
No, yeah, that's what I mean. I'm the same. I don't have the, I don't know, whatever it is to be able to do it for a long time.
Have you found, is there anything you can still indulge in? Have you found like a safe or healthy like steam valve when you want to be indulgent?
So I guess the accumulation thing is the idea here. So if you can roll with that, I think everything's in moderation. So I can go ahead and like drink every so often and I'll be all right. But like for the most part, I'll just rather not, because I know that like one glass of wine will make me feel fucking terrible. But if I want to go out and have like a good night, then like I can go and do that. I just need to be like somewhat careful, because when you don't drink for a while, it becomes very easy to get drunk.
Oh yeah.
You just need to be wary of that sort of thing. So I mean, I definitely don't do that often still though, just because, I don't want to waste those days afterwards. But chocolate is definitely one of my weaknesses as well. I will always indulge in that.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. You got to have some. I mean, everybody's got to have something. So,
100%. You still got to enjoy your life, but you've got to know your limits.
Hey, man.
I think that's always been my own mantra.
Well, in that spirit, man, what else are you doing right now? What are you excited about? Anything we haven't talked about yet that was on your mind? Anything else you want to get out there before we wrap it up?
Dude, I mean, there's so much going on. It's really, to 2022, I feel like is going to be really exciting. I've got EPs coming out this year, so I'm focusing on doing like bodies of work as opposed to just doing singles, which is really exciting because I've really done a whole lot of that. I've done like, the change and decay stuff, which has been great. And, but I've got this Ophelia thing coming out, which I'm really excited for. I think that's going to show a side of me that I really wanted to show for a while. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's been a long time coming, because I really love this stuff. Like, I always have like the melodic dubstep and the dubstep. Like, I feel like that's been something that I've been working towards getting to a point that I want it to be. And that's been it's been a hard road, because I want it, the quality wise, as a creative, you're perfectionist when it comes to that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
and it's a different kind of writing too, right? Like, it's a little more song based, and then when the melody is the focus, that sort of changes the way you think about producing it, all that.
Yeah. 100%. I feel like songwriting was definitely like a focus point for me over the pandemic. Like taking courses and doing all that sort of thing and learning that side was something that I never really got taught when, I was coming up. Like, you need to be able to write songs. Like, oh yeah, true. I should probably like do something about that. Because maybe that's not my strong suit or whatever. I think like realizing what you're good at, what you can improve at as a producer is also really like beneficial. You can't be like, I'm the shit and that's it, because you won't learn anything. You'll just be stagnant. So yeah, that I think has been a really cool like learning curve. And I feel like this is going to be a really, really good showcase of what I'm doing. And the artwork for this is super cool too, because my mum's a painter, and the artwork that I'm doing for like this EP is all stuff that she's done. And it's all Australian landscape based.
Oh, wow.
So it's like very much a home, like it's all watercolor Australian landscapes. And they're different backgrounds for like each single. And then there's like one main one for the EP, obviously. And I think that's going to be a really fun thing to roll with. And it's going to be really exciting to sort of show people. And I think that like definitely like, I don't know. I just love the fact that I've been able to do something with my mum.
That's so
with
cool.
This.
Yeah,
This is so
great.
Cool. So I'm really, really excited to show like what I've been working on with that stuff in terms of like that EP. And then I've got, we'll do some D&B stuff later on. So I'm that fucking excited for, dude. It's gonna be good.
That's gonna be good, man. And are you still in the mindset of working with a bunch of different labels? Or do you think you're going to stick with one or another?
Well, Ophelia and Deadbeats have been like my home labels for sure, because they've just been so supportive and so great with everything. And I love both of those teams. So definitely still like working with those guys. We'll be doing like something with Deadbeats later on in the year as well. So I'm excited to really like hone into that. And then 2023 will be a big year of kind of like bringing like everything together, I suppose. So yeah, musically, it's a really exciting time for me, because I feel like everything has been leading up to these like coming moments, I suppose, like creatively and like as personal journey type stuff. Like everything's going to make sense eventually in terms of the whole like diversity thing. Like I was saying before, it's just kind of like, it's kind of scary doing it all, but like when it kind of reaches this point where everything starts to make sense and people click and go, oh, like the dubstep and the melodic and like the D&B and the mid-tempo and everything, that they all coexist with each other now. Like that's my goal and that's my aim with this project. So I think that's going to happen over the next like year or so, which is really cool. So musically, that's kind of where I'm at this point in time.
I love that, man. How about personally? How are you feeling about about life?
Dude, life is great. I mean, especially so going back to Australia for those 9 months during the pandemic, that was a really, really important thing for me that I didn't foresee before it. I realized how like I went back and lived with my sister and her family. So I was like surrounded by my nieces and nephews and was there for like my nephew's 18th and him getting a car and him, like I took him to his first clubbing experience, which is at the club that I like grew up at, that Academy place. And that kind of shit was like so fucking cool to be around. And I didn't realize how important that kind of stuff was until, I went and did it. And then also rekindling like old friendships and stuff and like finding rock climbing and really like learning about what stuff was super important to me in life generally. You can kind of lose that perspective and lose that kind of like vision when you're working and when you've moved to another country and like when that encapsulates your entire life. So taking that step back and being in that environment was huge, because now I've come back over here now in a much better headspace. And that's kind of why I moved to Denver, because I needed to be surrounded by this and these people. And like I'm living with like Willy Black and Inzo, and it's a super inspiring environment. And I'm just, surrounded by the things that I really and truly love. And I think that was like a super important thing for me.
Yeah, LA can be disorienting, man, in that way, I think. LA is an incredible place that I have so much love for, but I think it can be, like you see people who have lived there for decades and it's just like, they are kind of living in a different reality,
Yeah, Yes, 100%. It kind of like it does get a lot. And I feel like you need to have like the right headspace going in. I feel like you need to be really strong as a person going in because you can get sucked into shit really easily. But it's a really good place. Like it's an amazing place.
Yeah.
And the environment there is insane. Yeah. But like, you just need to be like on your shit when you get there.
Yeah, 100%, man. But then at the same time, I think I think recognizing that you need a home base somewhere like Denver or whatever, and really, making a space for yourself that's separate from like the larger scene that we inhabit. I think that's a very, very smart move.
I think so for sure. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, it'd be cool because I get to go back over home later this year now, which is good. I try to go back like at least once a year. But I've got a really big festival run later on, which is going to be extremely exciting. It's like one that, every Australian's kind of like would want to do.
Yeah. Well, because you're like big in Australia, right? Like
it's hard
bigger
to tell,
than the States, at least.
No, I wouldn't say so. I don't know, man. I don't think it's hard to gauge sometimes, but I would say like here is definitely where like I've got the most love. But like Australia, I definitely have some like really good fans because they've been around since like I call them friends now. Like they've been around for years. You know what I mean? Since like before I was Blank type thing. And like, that's just the coolest shit. So yeah, it'll be cool because I get to, I'll go back over and I'll do this run and I'll be able to play like some drum and bass and do all that kind of thing and really rekindle and get back with those I don't know, my roots again, which would be great. Cause I mean, like when I was back over in Australia, I did do a few shows and it was, it's always really good to be back home.
Yeah, man. When I was talking to Anna Luno just like a couple weeks ago, that we were talking about, because she went back home and I think right now she's playing a bunch of Australian festivals that I think were some of the first like big gigs she had when she was first starting out, and she was talking about that kind of full circle moment. It's nice you get to do that, man.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It'll be really cool. So yeah, going back home so good. And we have like really cool festivals back home, which are like a different vibe to here because Australia. Yeah. Have you been?
Yeah. I've toured Australia just once, but I did get to play a variety of different shows, and it was cool. It was amazing. Yeah,
hell yeah. Because like the festivals there are different to here in the sense of like, even the dress sense and the fashion and like the way, candy doesn't exist over and it's, and like it's a lot more indie kind of focused and I don't know, kind of hipster in a way. And it's like just a different kind of environment. And it's I don't know, it's refreshing sometimes, but like, it's cool being over here and seeing the way that people, I guess, absorb the music and absorb the scene compared to like back home. It's like, yeah, man, it was really refreshing. The first show I ever played in Australia was Breakfest out in Perth. Yeah. I don't know if you ever went out there, but it's like such a beautiful venue, and the focus of the music is different than like most American festivals, and it was just such a breath of fresh air. That's cool. Yeah, for sure. It's Perth is a super cool place. I fucking love it. I think it's like the most isolated major city in like the world or something. I think that's right. Yeah. I think I read that somewhere. It's just like they've got their own like accents and their own like dress sense and like. Oh yeah, because they're on the other coast and there's like nothing else around there. There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing. That's it. Darwin is up in like the Northern Territory, which is still ages away, and then Adelaide, and that's like halfway across the country. And then there's the whole East Coast. So like that, and then there's South Africa on the other side. So it's right. Yeah. That's wild, man. But yeah, it's great. Perth has a really, really good scene, really great bass scene, like, Pendulum Knife Party, if you want to call it, like, comes out of there. Like there's I don't want to say who's come from there because I don't specifically know, but like guys like Shock One and stuff, but I know there's so much talent that comes out of Perth. Hey man, this has been great. I really appreciate it. I know we ran a little long. I got one more question for you. It's the same question I ask at the end of each one of these interviews. It's a quick thing, kind of the first thing that pops into your head kind of question. Just looking for like a memory from your life, a moment, could be from any time, when in that moment, music really, really had an impact on you in that moment, really deeply affected you. And that's meant to be super broad question. There's no wrong answer. I mean, one of the memories for music for me, when it's like particularly like I suppose EDM, was when I saw Porter Robinson at Academy and he played Language, and like that for me was a really interesting turning point because I was like, holy shit, this is this is, for some reason, this is so much deeper than what you kind of expect on like a EDM clubbing level. And you go, oh, okay, right. And then he goes on to do shit like Worlds, and he like affects fucking everybody in the music scene. Like that was, I always specifically remember that moment in my life for sure. But yeah, and the other moment was definitely like my brother teaching me "Come As You Are" as like a kid. I think that was super cool. It's just been, I don't know, for some reason that's always been in my head, and it's always like part of my like guitar movements and shit. And just like, I think that was my earliest music memory.
I mean, that's a beautiful thing, man, because that's the moment of moving from being a fan to being a participant,
Totally.
Yeah,
totally.
That's foundational. And I'll even try to connect it to your Porter Robinson story, which is that, I think you probably saw him that night at a transition point in his career where he was still playing, the big house clubs, and he was known for kind of, for EDM at that point, just straight up EDM. And I'm sure for him, it was starting to play these new songs and starting to try to push a new direction for him, which I'm sure was not easy at the start. And it's cool that you were sort of able, just as someone who was at the club, to tell that like, oh, something is changing here in the same way that it was probably changing for him,
Totally. That's so weird. It was so true though. You're right. Far out.
Yeah, it's wild, man. Well, and I'm sure you're giving those moments to people at some point in your career too, man.
Yeah. I mean, when you get the DMs of people saying stuff like that and expressing like their appreciation for what you do, it's like, that still is, I find it really difficult to comprehend. Because it's just like, I am you. Like, I'm not some fucking guy like that's up whatever. Like that was one of the things that I wanted to like, Blank has like a fan base, and it's like Blank's nobodies. And the whole idea is that like, there's like no ego and there's no hierarchy. There's no nothing. Like everyone's at the same playing field, including me. Like I'm not this other like higher entity to you guys. Like that's why I go out in like the crowd and stuff at festivals and at shows and stuff. So I can like be on the same level, because I'm not always having to be up on the stage,
right? Like
projecting to you guys. Like, so yeah, it's, I don't know.
Well, and everybody starts off that way regardless, right? Like, if you were doing the local DJ thing for years, I mean, that's the most thankless job there is. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's less thankless or more thankless jobs, but it's not great.
I feel it. Yeah, you're definitely going to trudge it for a bit there. Yeah.
Well, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have anything else. How are you feeling?
No, I'm feeling good. This is great. Like I said, I've been like listening to your shit for ages, so this is super cool to actually jump in.
Oh, absolutely. No, and I know we talked about doing this like a long time ago too.
Oh, years ago.
And then I don't know what happened, but I'm glad we connected.
That was going to be a right time, and now is that time. So
absolutely.
Don't force it, dude. Don't force it.
And hopefully, now that I know you're out in Denver too, next time I'm in the area, man, I'll hit you up. It'd be great to connect in real life.
Yeah, I would love to, man. And likewise with DC. I actually really like DC. Every time I'm there, I'm like, this is a great place. I think because it reminds me of home.
There you go, man. No, yeah, I'll take you around. Absolutely.
Hell yeah, dude. Yeah, thanks again. This is great.
Dude, thank you, man. This has been awesome. And have a great rest of your day, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good, brother. All right, I'll speak to you.
Peace,
gotcha.
Man.